When people ask me, hey, where do you come from and how did you learn 6 languages? So it's kind of hard for me to answer that because I feel like I don't come from just one place. I guess I have 2 home countries and most people don't really understand that or can't relate because they only know one home, one native language, and one place where they have lived with their families their whole lives. And I consider that I have 2 or even 3 native languages. Hi, I'm Andrea and welcome to Social Coconuts' Languages Unboxed, where you'll listen to everything related to English, Spanish, and other foreign languages. In this episode, you'll listen to 3 tips that have really helped me on how to pick up languages easier for when you travel or move to another country or for work or study. Subscribe to my channel, I'd love your support. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so it all started when I was a little girl. I was born in Venezuela, and living there was already becoming a very big problem due to political and government issues. So my parents, they made a smart move and decided that we should all go, the whole family, and move to the island of Bonaire, which is now known as the Dutch Caribbean. Now I was about 2.5 or 3 years old when I arrived on this island, but we remained speaking Spanish at home. At school, the teacher spoke to us in PAPIAMENtu, which is the local language, and the lessons were in Dutch since we were in the Netherlands Antilles back then. The learning system is the same as the Dutch system. So as the lessons were in Dutch, I had to learn Dutch from scratch. This happened, like it goes with most toddlers, by listening and repetition. And when I started reading, that's when I started learning Dutch in 1st grade of primary school. When getting home from school, my sister and I used to watch cartoons in English because all our channels, well, not all of them, but most of them were from the US. And however, my parents only spoke Spanish to us at home, and I remember clearly that my mom taught us how to read in Spanish before we learned how to read in other languages. So apart from all this learning, my parents had enrolled us in all kinds of activities where we had to speak English because these were people from the US, and I also attended a few English lessons as well. I took a special liking for the English language, and I immediately knew that I wanted to do something with it in the future. I wasn't exactly sure what, but I knew English was the language that I really loved. So it's very normal to speak 4 languages in Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, which are the Caribbean islands. We speak PAPIAMENTU in Bonaire and Curacao, and PAPIAMENTO in Aruba, and also Dutch because of the learning system, and Spanish because a lot of the population is Latino, so Latin Americans have immigrated to these islands, and this has been occurring for a lot of years now. Aside from having lived on this island for more than 11 years, also counting the years that I lived there as a grown-up, I also lived in other places where I had to learn other languages, whether it was for school or because it was just the country I moved into. I learned French in high school when I moved to the Netherlands as a teenager, but because I was so fond of the language, in my spare time, I listened to music, read the lyrics, and translated them to understand what I was singing. I also found random videos online that I really enjoyed watching in French, which helped me a lot, and I improved in just about 2 months. So that's it right there. That's a really big tip. Aside from learning the language in school or at any language school, I put some extra effort to learn and practice outside classroom hours, and my progress was significantly noticeable in just a few months after doing this consistently every single week. It doesn't have to be hours upon hours, it can just be 5 to 10 minutes a day, and remember that small habits make big progress at the end. So then I also had to learn to speak Galician, which is a language spoken in the north of Spain. It's just above Portugal. I moved to Spain with my family and I lived in La Coruña for quite a while. So I learned it through watching TV, such as news reports that just came up, and I sat up and watched them while I was having dinner or lunch, through TV ads that came up in between movies or anything I was watching on TV, and by listening to people around me who spoke it daily. I also studied the bachillerato, which is like an equivalent to a high school diploma, and I also did my university studies there. And most of the class materials were in Galician. So reading and looking up words in the dictionary was also a way of progressing fast. That's the second tip. By doing some basic and leveled reading in the language you're learning, you can acquire vocabulary that you'll need to advance and get better until you go to the next level of that language you're learning. Without enough vocab, you can't really move forward because you'll always be like stuck at the same level if your vocabulary range is low. So go ahead and find out what your level is and do some graded or leveled reading. Now, while I was living in Spain, I decided to major in the English language and literature. And on top of that, I really love translating as well. So I did a master's degree in that in Barcelona. Then I started working as a language instructor right away in my last years of college and also after I left college. Now, because I knew Dutch, I thought I might as well learn German because whenever I heard German, I understood maybe more than half of what they were saying. So I thought I'd give it a shot. I also thought it might come in handy someday if I wanted to work in another job field such as tourism. I decided to enroll in a regular German course for 2 months and went to class for about 1 hour a week. I also did a lot at home. I loved making post-it notes about things that I've learned and new vocabulary that I had acquired, with words and phrases that were useful and relevant to me. I also watched several movies in German with subtitles in English just to hear the accent and get used to the pronunciation. I didn't understand everything, obviously, but that's beside the point because this is just to get familiarized with the intonation and the pronunciation of the language. I started at the very basic level and soon realized that I got pretty good in 2 months. I had achieved a basic A2 level in German language. So that right there is another tip for you. Keeping record of vocabulary and meaningful phrases that you are most likely to use in your daily life is what is going to keep you motivated to continue learning. Don't just learn random words and phrases that you will never use. Use a paper or a digital journal or whatever works for you to write your progress down. Write keywords, phrases you know you need to use to communicate in that specific language that you're learning. It came in handy for me because I actually ended up working with some German tourists on one of the islands that I lived. Because yes, I lived on other Caribbean islands. And I learned a few phrases and possible questions and answers that were actually lifesavers at that point. So when you meet someone that speaks more than 2 or 3 languages, ask them how they did it, how they track their progress, what methods they use to learn a language, what works and what doesn't. And after that, you can go ahead and try it out for yourself, and only then you'll find out what works for you and for your own learning process. After you've learned a few languages, learning other ones will probably get easier, and you'll know what works for you and what doesn't. This will help you move forward quicker and more efficiently when learning that particular language that you want to master. You can go ahead and use these 3 tips that I gave you, try them out, and I'd love to hear what other tips you might have to learn a new language. Who knows, maybe I can use them myself. Go ahead and follow me on social media for more useful tips and materials about language learning. You can find all the links in the description box. Good luck, and I'll see you next time.